6 hours and 21 minutes I spent on my phone on Tuesday. I don't even know what I was doing. The other day I was out at a bar with a friend and he showed me his phone, and it was very different from mine. His was a device that was designed to be used as little as possible. It's called a light phone, and it started a conversation between us that lasted about an hour and a half, talking about technology, its role in our life, and what we get from it versus what we're giving to it. After that, I wanted to track down the makers of this device. I talked to the founders of Light Phone about the story behind it, why they developed it, and how they view this crisis of humanity, where on average 5.4 hours of our day, about a third of our waking time, is spent staring at these little screens opposed to living our actual lives. So I'm going to play for you this interview. I hope it gets the wheels turning in your own mind about how your device fits into your life and what it's taking from you. When you're using your phone, a lot of the time, you are not the customer, you're the product. So I am not affiliated with Light Phone. I am not endorsing it. They're not paying me to promote it. It was a conversation that I thought brought me a lot of uncomplication and a lot to think about, and I wanted to share that with you. If you want to hear the full uncut version of this interview, you can check out the Uncomplication podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, if you want to support Uncomplication, you can become a patron at patreon.com/uncomplication. And I really, really appreciate all of your incredible support. All right, sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with the founders of Light Phone. Cheers. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me on another Uncomplication. I'm Ryan, and I am thrilled to have a couple of guests with me here today, Joe Hollier and Kaiwei Tang. Are you co-founders or? Cool. So
Yes.
co-founders of the Light Phone, which is this device that I saw for the first time a couple days ago. I was out having drinks with a friend who I noticed he was a little hard to get a hold of, actually, that we were trying to coordinate times and places. And when I saw his phone, I understood why. The device itself reminds me of maybe a first or second generation iPod. And in your own marketing, you describe it as a phone that's designed to be used as little as possible. So at the bar, this kicked off probably an hour and a half worth of some of the best conversation I've had in a while about technology, its place in our lives. And I was thrilled to see that there are actual designers and companies out there that are trying to design phones for humans. So with that kind of a preamble, I would love to kick it over to you and just ask, maybe a little bit about your background and the moment that you guys came up with this idea for the Light Phone.
Of course. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks again for having us. Super excited to talk about it. I guess to kind of talk about how Kai and I met, it was 2014, and Google, of all people, had this idea for an experimental incubator for designers to come and think of new ideas for companies. And Kai and I, with about a dozen others, came to New York City and started meeting. It was almost like a school year, the program itself, and we met probably 100 different founders and investors and just kind of thought leaders in the technology space. And the idea was that we'd learn how and why a lot of these companies were being built, and start pitching them some of our hypothetical ideas that we would hopefully try to make real. And I think a trend that Kai and I saw quite quickly was around the idea of stickiness. And they call that metric retention. How many hours a day does someone spend on your app or your product? But really, they wanted us to make apps. And it was kind of this golden rule. If you could make something sticky, the VCs and all the investors loved it because they could see it scaling and, adopting all sort of business models from advertising to data collection. And Kai and I just kind of in that program thought, could making some new app possibly make our lives any better? Is being more connected for 2 more hours a day what we want? Or, when we interviewed people or thought about our own experience, we were like, I want to get off the smartphone. I want to, people were craving an escape and actually feeling habitually overwhelmed. So we kind of started giving people flip phones and experimenting with this idea of going light. And, not necessarily ditching technology forever, but because the smartphones became so ubiquitous so quickly, within 10 years, we were waking up with them, checking it before, even getting out of bed. And we said, we can sign off for a couple of hours to go on a date or spend time with our kids or get back to, some of our passions, um,
We
and
think
to do
it's
so.
so normal.
Yeah,
We think
exactly.
it's so normal right now, but if you start talking to people, you kind of realize like when you or anyone else ever said that I spent 6 hours in my Instagram or Twitter. I loved it. I want to do it again. Like no one ever said that. We all hate it afterwards, right? We all like, oh, what do I just do? And we keep doing it, and to us it really not about us anymore. Like the billions of dollars being invested into the industry, hire the most talented engineer designers to create app that collect data, time, attention, so that companies can make a lot of money. I mean, the business model makes sense, right? No big technology companies are doing something about it because that's the main revenue stream. So we kind of both um, uh, don't agree with what's going on, and we decided to do something completely opposite. Like
Hmm.
we like tools, we like technology tools that help us getting a task finished quickly, but it shouldn't be us using a tool and then you start swiping your tool for 5 hours so that tool company can make money.
Hmm.
It should be just useful tool, utility tool. Use it, you put it back. So that's why
Yeah.
it's designed to be used as little as possible. You use it, put it back. You never seen it again. Your screwdriver lives somewhere else. You never thought about your screwdriver. When you're not trying to screw something into the wall or
So,
furniture.
so so when you had this flash of insight that you could actually use the design process to build a device, not an app, what was that feeling like, and what was the response from the people that you were telling the idea to?
From the beginning, the polarization that we saw that Kai kind of talked about was so incredibly powerful to us in terms of like validating that this is a very important conversation. I think, even you in the introduction mentioned that, you and your friend, the phone itself, I'm sure you didn't play with the phone for an hour and a half because there's not much to do, but it led to these kind of deeper philosophical, existential almost questions about, humans and our relationship to technology. And I think even when, we would present our idea and maybe two of these thought leaders or investors, one might say, oh my god, I need this right now, email's ruining my life,
Hmm.
please, please, please. And the other person's like, what kind of professional could possibly get away from email for 5 hours on a weekend? And they would start almost not arguing, but having these deep conversations. And I think ever since we launched our Kickstarter campaign for the first phone, right at the end of that 30 weeks program, we saw that same kind of, polarization leading to these interesting conversations. Why would I pay $100 for a phone that intentionally does nothing? That was the original light phone.
Hmm.
And, it kind of got wheels turning in people's head, and understanding like, oh, wow, the value of not having these features. What is that like? And how might I use that time if I were to disconnect? So even before we ever had the phone, it was so cool to see the conversations were just kind of already snowballing and so rich, and that led to us kind of being able to get some organic press and people sharing and talking about the idea. I
Well,
think
it wasn't. Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's we're trying to do a hardware mobile device. It's probably it's more. We know it's gonna be an uphill battle for us to create phones as individuals, right? We're so used to see phones being created by big companies like Apple, Motorola, LG, Samsung. I used to develop phones for Motorola, and I know how difficult it is, and we know it's going to be an uphill battle. But at the same time, it just seems like the behavior or the behavior of ours, how we use phone, just seems so much like a crisis, of I guess humanity, right? Because I watch my niece and nephew using any screens. When they use it, their face go blank. They stop talking to me. They stop interacting. And so when we were talking about ideas, the reaction was very uh, polarized, right? Some people think this gonna change their life, and some think, I like my smartphone. I don't know, why do I need a minimized or a phone that do less. It was really quite interesting conversation, and I guess that's like the most informative conversation we had with people, is like what's essential, right? When you think about those tools in your phone, like phone call, text message, alarm clock, but it's in your pocket. So when you sit in the park, right, you don't have things to swipe, to get lost to. We remove all the distraction, noise, and I guess manipulations. So you sit there. What's the most important things, right? What do you want to think about? What's what's the important thing that you wanted to do that you haven't done, right? So stuff like that is something that we really wanted to share, the benefit of going light. Why can't we have a different tool that doesn't design to fight for our time and attention? So we when we introduced light phone, we actually wanted to be a secondary phone. The first generation, we wanted to be a second phone, so that you could take a break with, so you have the right tool but don't have all the distractions.
Yeah, that's super interesting. One of the questions I have here, I think there's a lot that we could talk about why it's important, but one of my questions was, who is it for? And it strikes me that there's a certain type of person, and my friend who had one of these is a great example. I mean, he's a super brilliant guy. He works in a bookstore. He's building this huge collection of, really interesting books, and he's a librarian, right? So he's checking email, but he's living that pace of life, I think, intentionally. So I think that fits in pretty well with his intentions already. If you brought this to someone who is used to waking up at 3 in the morning, answering 1,000 emails, being on Slack all day, like that entangled, I could see there being an immediate just disregarding, this will never work, or maybe it's a second phone or something that I could do for an hour on Sunday afternoon. But it also seems like the question itself about how much can you get rid of and still do your job, can you answer fewer emails and still be a professional? Maybe in that vein, who is it for? Do you see this being actually something that the founder of a startup could put in their pocket and replace their smartphone? Or is it really kind of aiming at these maybe alternative lifestyle people to begin with?
I think it's been pretty amazing to see the wide variety of users. I wouldn't say we feel that there's any one demographic. I think the CEO type that you describe would benefit from the productivity of focus, by narrowing their distractions and, kind of compartmentalizing tasks to different devices. Kai and I run the Light Phone business. I have this laptop here. It's great. I can do all my emails, but then I can close the laptop and focus on, some of the longer term tasks or, design challenges that we're facing without seeing a million Slack notifications. So I think whatever field you're in, it's really about intentionality. And obviously, some people are going to feel that friction, and there's a lot of excuses, an infinite amount of excuses actually that you can make for why having a light phone might be a burden or friction. I think is a good way to describe it. But we've seen people use it as this kind of family thing. Religious families in particular have really gravitated to the phone, but also artists and people who are more freelance, who maybe don't have as defined on and off hours. The light phone can kind of start to represent that space away from work. But outdoors, people have embraced it. Parents have given it to kids as a kind of first phone. It's been really inspiring to see the different ways that people fit it into their lives.
Doesn't matter how busy you are, you gotta sleep, you gotta have some time off so that you could recharge, you could actually reflecting on things that we do. So I think that's sort of what we're trying to do, like defining tools. We are human, we use different tool in different occasion, we don't use one tool for every scenario, and that's where light phone comes in. I think we're trying to say, hey, my laptop, my iPad does pretty much everything else that I need to do. But when I walk around or commute, I don't really need to watch a video when I in the subway, or play on a game, or waiting in line grocery. I don't need to pull out my phone and swipe, right? So that's I think that's where we come from.
Yeah. And it's funny, I mean, I'm just reflecting that I think I've gone through different periods where I couldn't go to sleep unless I had earbuds on. And you go to the bathroom, it's like, oh, where's my phone? It's either that or read the shampoo bottle, right? So you get into this pattern where whether you like it or not, you're just always looking for that. I don't know if it's a dopamine hit or,
Or addiction.
yeah, an addiction, right? And then when I am able to just I don't know, put that stuff away. I mean, I've never been one for social media. I don't have Facebook. It's something that I kind of recognized early on was not the type of lifestyle that I wanted anyway. But this whole experiment has got me thinking, where where do these devices actually fit in, and what do I really need? Yeah, so I guess for your own experience, what was your technology consumption like when you had your own smartphones, and what was that transition like when you started using your own product? And I assume, and cutting back on that saturation.
We both switched to light phone full time, and I mean, obviously we're biased because this is exactly what we wanted, and that's why we created for ourselves. I guess our users told us they feel less stressful, they feel less anxious. We have people telling us they actually sleep better. We have a gentleman email us saying that his heart rate actually reduced when he used Lightroom, and that's all the benefit we wanted to share with people. I mean, reading more book, watching more movies, they feel like they have 5 hours, 5 more hours a day when they stop carrying around a smartphone. Like one story I always remembering is that I think a reporter is using iPhone, and the biggest thing that she realized when she go late was that she gave herself permission to just stay in the queue in the grocery, just look around. It is
Mm,
okay. Like I'm fine. I'm okay. I don't need to swipe social media. I could just standing there for like 20 seconds, do nothing.
mm,
Yeah, I think that's the profound experience we wanted to give. Well, we hope people will experience when they go late. And we kind of, I'll say, we both experience uh, that when we on light phone for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a terribly hard transition, I think, because the things that maybe I found myself doing on my phone as a freelancer before the light phone were stressful. So getting them out of my life and, you know, dictating them more to a specific time of day and a device specifically was really relieving for me. I remember being on a beach with my smartphone and going to change the song on the little Bluetooth speaker and seeing an email from a client. This is before the light phone, and just like it ruined my whole
mm,
beach day. I'm in Miami with my girlfriend, and now it's all I'm just screw this guy and he's asking for this file and it's nothing I can actually do in the moment, but I didn't even like, there's no reason to see it. I told them I was on vacation, but of course the email came, I saw it, I let it really throw my day off. So it was moments like that or the opposite, waking up on a Saturday and you're like, what do I do? And it's, wait, 3 hours have already passed. I just was scrolling away. I didn't find myself to be addicted, but I think we're so much more vulnerable than we want to admit. And I think having made the transition to a light phone user full time, um, something that's interesting is that, I guess we would hope maybe that being away from it would teach me to not succumb to those vulnerabilities. But the pandemic hits, I open up my laptop and, I have to consciously uh, you know, bring that same intentionality to every aspect of the internet. I think that was a kind of an interesting thing. It's like, yes, it's great. I don't have a smartphone, but if I open my laptop, am I not just as vulnerable to these kinds of holes and to kind of, treat them in the same way that I treat the light phone, why did I open Twitter? A lot of users describe to us on their smartphone closing Instagram, turning 2 pages and then reopening it without even thinking like I want to reopen Instagram. Like I closed it and reopened it 6 times in a row. And it's like those kind of unconscious things. And I've broken a lot of those. And I think that's super powerful. But, there's definitely some inconveniences to using the light phone. And I think what Kai and I have been focused on with our development team is trying to update the phone with upgrades that stay aligned with the ethos but allow users to have a little bit less friction. So we added the directions tool um, in September, and that's been a really great thing because people aren't going to look up directions when they're bored at a restaurant, but it's a nice peace of mind to know, like, God forbid I get lost or forget where the address is, I can get somewhere. So slowly we're trying to offset some of these inconveniences, but oftentimes it's really empowering for people to not have the smartphone. For so long we didn't have directions and people were like, I was scared to leave the house without GPS, but now I'm like, I know my whole town. And worst case, you ask a stranger for directions and they're usually really nice, and you might even have a great talk about why I don't have a smartphone. So for every kind of negative, there's also like a kind of bright side to it.
It's also a realization, isn't it? Like people get life. We have people supporting us get a light phone, But when you get light phone, it's really not that much to do on the phone if you don't call people, a text, or get a direction, or get a alarm clock. It's really not
There's a
something.
that's it moment that happens
Yeah,
where people are like so
yeah.
psyched, they have
They're
no
just
context,
so
they call their friend, and then they're like, now what? And that now what is exactly what we're selling.
Yeah.
yeah.
But for some people, that's, a lot. Artists perhaps are really good at, oh, now I have all this free time. Let me dive into the things I love. But
Well,
for
some
some
people
people,
can
yeah.
probably can't get over that hump, like
Hmm.
the feeling of just too bored,
FOMO
nothing
or
to
whatever.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but like we spoke about this many times. Like we think is actually good. Like boredom is good. We need to be able to handle or enjoy boredom, not even handle. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't be frustrated about boredom. You should be like, oh wow, you know, I got I got all these thoughts I could start to let it fly. I got all the things I could think about. Time, space. It's actually quite refreshing once you get over that that initial anxiety. But we get it. We don't expect everyone to get over it right away. It's a withdrawal symptom, right?
Yeah. Withdrawal is a good way to put it.
Yeah, just you feel nervous. You're like, oh, maybe you're sweaty. I don't know, but it's definitely not an easy thing to do. And we try to make it really clear, or even warn people that hey, going light is not as easy as picking up a speaker, new headphones, right? or
It's not a
get a
magic
new
pill
car.
either, you
Yeah,
know.
you're not gonna.
It's
It's not gonna solve
takes
your
a lot of
problem.
self will. You have to overcome that. I think people
Yeah,
get the phone and look for an excuse as to say like, ah, this thing sucks. I need my smartphone again. You know, it
yeah.
doesn't have X, Y, and Z. And whether they really needed that or not, who knows? Because it's a kind of a
But at
crutch.
least to get people start thinking like, what's the trade-off between convenience and your smartphone? Like, what do we have all this convenience, but like, what do we miss? Yeah, I think that's like something we've been trying to communicate. Obviously, we wanted to make phone experience. When you use the phone, we want it to be as smooth as possible. We want to have all the utility essential tools so that more people feel comfortable
Mm.
to go light, to give it a try. Even the secondary phone, weekend, holiday, vacation. If you're ready, go full time. But at
Mm.
least the phone experience, hopefully, we'll keep improving it. Um, but ideally, we want people to experience that. Wow, I don't really need um, this mini computer in my pocket 24/7. Go to toilet with, wake up with, go to sleep with. Like I just saw an article saying that like I don't know 70-80% of us pick up our phone right after sex. It's fascinating,
Huh.
but it's yeah.
I love that. I'm just putting myself into that place of what's next. And I have a friend who's fond of saying it's not what's next, it's what's now. And when you think about how much our phones are trying to, learn about us and predict our behavior and recommend the restaurants that we like and give us the turn by turn instructions, even though it's 70 miles, in 70 miles, make a left turn. Like it's always what's next. And I think having that moment, which actually yesterday, I kind of had that what's now moment where I was in Denver and it was Martin Luther King Day. So a lot of places were closed. And I was trying to find a vegetarian restaurant. So I'm driving dangerously, scrolling through Yelp and looking at all these reviews. A lot of things are closed. And knowing this interview was coming up, it's like, I used to be able to find food without Yelp telling me like what's good. So I threw my phone in the back seat. I ended up just driving around Denver, found some like cool neighborhoods with, art on the walls and just, I let my own intuition kind of guide me to where I wanted to be rather than the devices that would have told me that. And I ended up at this really cool little cafe bar, sat next to a gentleman that I talked to for about an hour. And that
That's
was, yeah, that I think that's to your point when you put down the technology, you have to take responsibility and you have to be confident or just comfortable that yeah, I'm not going to not sleep in my own bed tonight. Like I'm not going to get, lost in a river. I might make a few wrong turns, but that's how we used to get around. And by taking responsibility, you might actually learn these skills and not be so dependent. I'm sure you're aware. I love this little tidbit that there's a lot of car accidents and even fatalities that have happened where people have died by GPS, where their eyes told them like this is a boat ramp, but Siri was saying go straight, and they drove their car into the river because they put
Oh
more
my
faith in the technology than in their own human intuition. So that's actually kind of a nice pivot into the next line that I'd love to kind of take with you. When you look at the world at large, you look at this. I mean, it's a globalized culture now. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday about the Starlink satellites that now you can go out in the middle of the desert and you see these, parade of satellites going overhead. So we're not, everything else seems to be moving in the exact opposite direction of what we're talking about. More connectivity, more features. Every new iPhone or Samsung, they're just touting more and more and more. What do you see when you extrapolate that out another 10 years? Keeping in mind that the iPhone has only really been a product in people's hands for 10 years and we're already here. What are the two paths that you see? The hyper connectivity versus maybe the choice to take some of that responsibility back.
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking about it in terms of like a path is kind of where we are with light. I think we felt very strongly that everything was moving in this one direction, like every single technology company it felt, and we wanted to create an alternative. And I think it's not that necessarily light is going to create a completely radically different technological landscape, but I think by having alternative options, users will be able to navigate that at their own desire. They can connect with the new laptop and then they can have a light phone, and or maybe they don't have a laptop at all and they go full light phone or something like that. But in terms of where technology is headed, I would say I'm pretty pessimistic looking at how things have unfolded thus far. um, and I can only imagine that it's going to be more clickbait news and more screens and more digital everything. And I do think that there's enough people in the world, maybe not the majority of people, that are wanting something, a little bit more analog, wanting to keep some of that humanity up front. And so we just try to provide an option for those people. I don't think we think we're going to dethrone the iPhone, and smartphones are going to be extinct. Everyone wants a dumb phone now, but I do think there's lots of people who are finding profound benefits from getting rid of their smartphone. So I mean, maybe if I would try to be optimistic, maybe enough people would kind of come to their senses and realize that the smartphone's probably not making them feel better, and it's actually probably making them feel worse more often than they realize.
Luckily, fortunately, we have a lot of users um, that love what we're doing and share uh, light phone with that. Like, I love how you know about
Heard
come to
about
know about
us.
light
Yeah.
phone too in the bar. I mean, that's exactly what we're
That's
hoping.
our ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you see someone using it and hope and maybe have a conversation about it and
You don't
maybe
use paid ads, you use existential conversations. See, I dig it. I resonate with that.
yeah,
But it's hard to
It's
pitch
what
to
about
easy to
VCs.
put that in an investor's deck either.
Yeah.
what
People are going
about
to talk about it. That's how we'll get out there.
oh, but I think I do see this movement become big enough trend, and we do see a lot more investors coming on board on this idea of prioritize well-being. I mean, whether or not they really think that that's what they want, but at least this this trend, this movement is getting enough people
Mm.
um, interest to keep us going. I think we actually experienced the biggest growth last year. Um, it just to us, it's natural. Like this problem of smartphone addictions, 5G, social media is never gonna go away. It's gonna get worse. And when this get worse, I think the other side is gonna get bigger. Meaning, more people is gonna realize something
Hmm.
is wrong and we should do something about it. And maybe we're early, but that's fine. Every company starts that niche product. And I think we are probably early in our time in 2014 when we start the idea, but at the same time we're seeing every year more people start talking about deleting their Twitter or digital
Yes.
detox, right?
So many reasons along from 2014. I mean, whether it's this scandal, this,
Mm.
abuse of privacy gets exposed, or screen time feature when that was released, and you heard the Apple CEO kind of going out and saying, we all use our phone too much, and people were able to kind of get confronted. I
Mm.
think if you ask someone, like, are you addicted to your phone? They're like, yeah, not that bad. Or maybe they say, yeah, but like not like some people. And if you ask them how many hours, they would probably vastly underestimate. And I think
Mhm.
getting confronted with, wait, 4.5 hours times 7 days a week times how many weeks in a year, you're starting to be able to see just how much of yourself you're giving to the device. And I
Mm.
think, the combination Social Dilemma came out a little over a year ago. I know that documentary brought a lot of attention to this because it was able to really break down the problems we're talking about. So yeah, it's been great to see the movement grow, but we're definitely, the underdogs as a company making a small phone from scratch, that's not, Motorola or Apple, as Kai mentioned.
Gosh. Yeah, I think one of the greatest things about your product, and I don't even have one, so I'm not even using it, but it's getting me thinking, right? Like it's a conversation piece. Like I would encourage anyone listening to have this conversation with someone close to you about your potential addiction to technology and share your screen time with someone and just where is that time going? I don't know. Those conversations I think are really important. And I was just thinking that there's a frog in the pot effect where when I was a kid, when I was in high school, we didn't have cell phones. So if we wanted to hang out with someone, we'd either like call up their landline, and if they're not home, we'd go to the places that they might be. You go to a friend's house, oh, he's not there,
Knock
and
on the
then we'd all
door,
kind of collect
exit.
somewhere, and we'd hang out in physical time and space, maybe play video games or go, out. But there wasn't even the concept that you could be in communication with your friends all the time, and we kind of stepped through the dumb phones, the smartphones, etc. And so I think that from an older perspective, or not even, I'm almost 40, so I'm not that old, but I've been on the transition. I see, whether they are just young people, the digital natives that are handed an iPhone when they're in some cases 6 years old. You
Yeah,
see
no
those kids
doubt.
out there, they never had that opportunity to learn boredom or to learn anything other than this constant pulling on their human strings. And I was talking to my friend the other day, the last episode that we posted, he was talking about in Ecuador these villages in the forest that are getting these antennas put up. And he was telling a story of this soccer game that has been like generational. This soccer game happens at sunset every day, and the day they turned on the Wi-Fi signal was the last day that that game was ever played. And that's that same kind of like you dive in to the current state of technology, and it's almost inescapable. um and gosh, yeah, this is just the thing. Like it unlocks all these stories. I remember going to South by Southwest with a bunch of younger musicians, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. We're gonna party our faces off. Like I haven't, I left my wife and kids at home, and I went with all these like young musicians, thinking I was gonna get like this rock star effect. And instead, we had this rented house. It was this awesome place, and all of these younger kids were just sitting there on Twitter and Facebook and whatever they were doing. But I was like, this is what you guys do. Like we're in this cool city. We have this whole house. Like you can do anything, and you're gonna sit, silently, like 15 people in a room just looking at their phones. And
Well, it
so,
remind me of I was taught I was so one of our investors. I always meet with him. Sometimes he bring his kids along, you know, to the meeting. So there's no TV in his house. He doesn't give smartphone to his kids. His kids like 8, 9, or 10 years old now. His kids never touch any screens growing up. So when we were in a meeting, we're chatting, and the kids just like listen very focusedly, intentionally listen to what we're saying, and at the same time, is playing with his shoelace, and like use his shoelace, create a little animal thing, and just listening to what we're saying, asking question, and playing the shoelace, and, and I was just mind blown. I was like, wow, like how did they grow up to be so so different without smartphone? And I think it's it just, to me, that's how we should um how we should treat our kids, meaning that allow them space and time, blank piece of paper, so they could develop, they could be creative, they could do whatever they want. Like right now, as you said, everyone communicates through their smartphone, so all the communication are probably one dimensional, right? Because face to face, even in video, I could tell you no in so many different ways. I could tell you no in a way that you feel horrible. I could tell you no in a way that you feel, oh, okay, like he knows what's going on, so but at with one dimensional communication, when you say no, it's no. Like there's nothing more, there's no more information, there's no subtle hand gesture. There's no facial expression. There's no head movement, right? You just everything's one dimensional. Like there's nothing else. I think we lost that in this generation, that majority of us communicating through digitally, right?
I love what you always used to say, Kai, which is like, if we as adults are having issues with controlling our, vulnerabilities and temptations with checking and rechecking, how could we ever expect our kids to have any more discipline than us,
Yeah, they definitely, there's no, if you give them a smartphone, they will definitely get hooked. There's no way out.
I mean, everyone will. I mean, it's crazy to see people's grandparents or older parents.
Mm.
Now I hang out with my mom and I feel like she's on her smartphone too much. And I'm like,
Yeah, and it's
just
all
don't be yelling
by
at me. I
design, isn't it?
don't,
Yeah, it's
you know,
designed. I mean, we have to identify that these are designed to be as or more addictive than cigarettes. And if we really boil down the numbers, I bet the health effects are just as adverse.
Yeah, and
um,
like when you want to quit smoking, you don't carry a cigarette around and say you don't not gonna use it.
Yeah. A lit
It's-
well,
cigarette and just not smoke it.
I know you were saying how you don't even have a phone, a light phone at least, and already, this conversation has got gears turning. I think something Kai and I have always wanted is that someone might see our project and not necessarily buy our phone, but maybe
Mm,
that night they delete Instagram app, or they, sort of start rethinking and maybe taking a small step. And I think, for the audience, like, you don't necessarily have to take the plunge to the light phone to start dabbling with, bringing down your kind of digital footprint, so to speak. uh, Whether that's deleting social media, turning your screen black and white. There's now even more apps that kind of like try to help you restrict or guilt you into not overspending time. Obviously, I think we kind of believe that those are a little bit band-aid in their approach.
mm,
And that, when someone takes off social media, now they're looking at shoes on Etsy or something for the time. There's kind of infinite holes on the smartphone to find. But I do think that there's, a degree of solutions for kind of
mm,
combating our digital addictions. And the light phones, one more extreme option,
mm.
can be quite profound if you're able to get there. But I think there's a variety of ways that people can start to tackle that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm really coming away from this is just that recognition of this being a dependency or an addiction. And I'm thinking about how, when you get a new iPhone or whatever, like there's no instruction manual because you turn the thing on and it's just leading you down these paths to use, compulsive use. You get a new app that's recommended to you. It's got all these, high ratings, like everything. That path is just there to tumble down. And I'm actually thinking that with the move to a device like a light phone, or even taking these steps to delete your social media, like there is instructions that are involved because now you're taking back your own humanity. And it's almost a spiritual or deeply personal set of steps, like quitting alcohol or like quitting smoking. And so here's what you guys should do: is you should create a user's manual for the light phone that has basically nothing about the phone, but it's like how to be a human again and how to deal with boredom and how to use your eyes again. It's like you almost need a support group to get through those steps of shedding the fear. Like, how am I going to get off my, all my relationships are on dating apps, or all of my, everything that I know about the world is in this digital space. And now an instruction manual for something like a light phone is like an instruction on how to be human again. It's that's yeah.
No, you're not wrong. And actually, like, organically, our community has made like Reddits and Discords, and people will, not only talk about, well, what do you say to someone when they say, why do you have that stupid little phone, to like, hey, does anyone have a workaround for like what they do for this? And they're like, oh, try this notebook, or I got this camera, or, like different things that the light phone doesn't do, sharing tips. And, I think having that community of people to to be like, okay, we're not the only people on the face of the earth without a smartphone. Because sometimes if you take the subway in New York City, you might think you are.
Yeah, all the glowing faces.
Everywhere. And I mean, that's like the funny thing is sometimes you'll be light and you're like, oh, I'm so present. And then every other person at the bar is heads down, except
Huh.
maybe the bartender, hopefully.
I
But
could see some funny advertising where it's just a bar, cool hip bar, all these beautiful people, and everyone's face is down except this one person looking around. They see that one other person who's not connected, and boom, magic sparks, real conversation. It is sort of like a litmus test for like the people that have escaped the matrix, right?
Yeah, I always
definitely.
joke about like if like our outer space species come to Earth right now and watching how we behave with our this device on hand, they would be like, "Who is this? You know, superior being that control human walk around?"
Yeah, screens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like they definitely they are controlled by some superior being through the device, right? It's just so weird. And I'm probably more positive. I feel like because this is so weird, I think this is just temporary. Eventually,
Mm.
we will realize this is just so unhuman. And doesn't mean technology is gonna stop. That means we probably going to like transition into a more human ways to use
Invisible
technology.
technology,
Yeah, like
technology should serve discreetly,
yeah. I mean, we
we
thought about putting we have we have a plan to put digital payment on iPhone. It's like we're not against technology. We think those are great, like helping us getting our life doing the task faster, so we could get back to our life. But at the same time, I just don't think this staring, swiping,
Mm.
8, 7, 10 hours a day, damaging our well-being, hurts our kids' creativity. I just don't think this is gonna continue. If it is, that would be pretty horrible. I would just live in a box, put on a goggle in a tiny little box. Right, Matrix you mentioned.
Yeah, people have used the Matrix red pill, blue pill analogy in
Mm.
describing committing to the light phone. And it's funny that I never thought about it till recently as an analogy, but it works pretty good.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, I mean, I just think about the world that's being offered to us through the devices, and it's very matrixy. I mean, the way that, and I've seen this now that I've gotten into like YouTube posting a bit more. Everything that the algorithms are doing is just skewing humanity to the extremes.
Mm.
It's caricaturizing the worst aspects, or at least I wouldn't say worst, but not the best. And if you look at what's happened in politics and what's happened in, I don't know, like all of our social issues, that schism is there, and a lot of it is because of that matrix, kind of dividing people across these lines. And so you get a bunch of people, off that stream and having real face-to-face conversations and recognizing that we're all human, we all breathe the same air,
Way
drink the
more
same
in
water.
common than we don't.
Yeah.
I think with the light phone, we've seen it cross a lot of lines politically, geographically, demographically. And that's been encouraging because I think if we are to get off our phones, we'd probably be able to get along a little bit better, I'd hope. It's easy to yell at someone you don't know on Twitter, I guess, in
Oh yeah, of
120
course.
characters or something and be such
And
a
they
mean person.
encourage that
But
too.
you might not do that if you were in real life with someone because you'd be looking at them and they're a real person with feelings and emotions. And, it's more complicated than the black and white of echo chambers.
Yeah. Well, this has been so awesome. And I knew as soon as I had this conversation with my friend that tracking you guys down was something I wanted to do. And it's pretty clear that you not only have the passion, you have the ability to deliver. It's really cool that you were supported by a community that saw that same vision. Crowdfunding, I think, is a way that you've also kind of brought this right to the people that need it and kind of short circuited the matrix. So keep going, guys. I love what you're doing. And for the people watching or listening, yeah, maybe take that time. What does it mean when you actually look at your device not as a product that you're using, but maybe something toxic that you're addicted to. Like, how does that change your perspective of what you need from it and what it's taking from you? And your website is thelightphone.com. If anyone
Yes.
wants to dive in and have that experience of cutting cold turkey. But at the very least, I think just bringing that conversation to the forefront is super important right now when we see so many just systemic issues that are not being helped by our feeds. So
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
yeah, appreciate it, guys. Love what you do. Awesome. Well, I'll let you get back to the trenches, but this was an awesome conversation,
All right,
and I'm gonna go buy me a light phone. I think that I'm the right type of person to try this experiment and talk about it a lot.
man. Oh, thank
Hope it
you.
works out. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Cool.
man.
All right, guys. Talk at you later.